I had something just to test the screen. I'm actually going to put it up in the line for a second because it's one quick thing. How many of you speak Spanish? How many of you speak Portuguese? How many of you speak Portuguese? How many of you speak Hindi? So what do? You get a phone call from somebody and you're communicating with them, but you're not really, you're not in their language. There's a little trick. This is before I get my normal speech. There's a little trick in PowerPoint where you can set it up for subtitles. I'm going to see what works for a second. It'll take a few minutes. It says not currently available.
Oh, I think we don't connect to Wi-Fi.
Because I'm not in the Wi-Fi. I'm not in the Wi-Fi. So, but normally if I'm in the Wi-Fi, as I'm talking, like I have a client that was a victim of a massive Ponzi scheme. I sued her real estate agent, got a $3.8 million verdict against her agent and collected the policy limits on her broker's account. She speaks Vietnamese. She lives in Oregon. I can hardly talk to her. She's a 5th grade education, but when I talk to her, running along the bottom of the screen, everything I say pops up in Vietnamese. I had a client the other day who was looking to buy a property in Radnor, and they live in Buenos Aires. And they called me, and I wasn't around the day they were here. They flew home. Now they're in Buenos Aires. They don't speak English very well. They speak it, but Portuguese is their language. I just zoomed them in. I put PowerPoint up on the screen, and as I spoke in English, they could read it in Portuguese. So that's just a cool little tip. But now we're going to go to the reason why I'm here. Why am I here? Let's see. I'm going to do let me kill the subtitles thing. I was going to give you subtitles in I don't know what language. You never know what language I'm going to give you. But I'm going to go through a couple of things today, and where did I put my little clicker thing? I didn't plug it in yet. We're going to go through a bunch of different things today, and at the very end, you get to ask me questions without my meter running.
Nice.
No gift cards.
Just realize.
Let's see if my battery's dead. Okay, first thing we're going to talk about is this market going to bite you? Is something going to happen in this market, and what can you do to make sure that it doesn't do that to you? We're going to talk about where is the line between practicing law and having a real estate license. I say this because I got the minutes of the unauthorized practice of law committee report from Pennsylvania Bar Association, and they haven't been stirring the trouble, but the Attorney General's office has been stirring the trouble and asking them. And the target people that they've been looking at are a group of realtors in the Pittsburgh area. And my experience with the Attorney General's office is if they start in the Pittsburgh area, then they go to Philadelphia, and then they go around the state. So it's an issue. We're going to talk about some changes in the agreement of sale that you may have noticed, but you may not have really put them together in your brain as to what they really mean. And we're going to talk about the latest ways to get sued. I often defend real estate licensees that have been sued, but I have sued 5 of them in the last 10 days. So, and I've talked about the kind of things that they have done wrong, and we'll go right through it. They're almost always stupid things. They're always cutting a corner, but we'll talk about that. For many years, there was a company called Kemper, and it did most of the E&O insurance for real estate licensees. I was their catastrophic loss counsel, so I got all of the cases where somebody was looking for big money. And I've seen that a lot of lawyers don't know how to sue realtors. That's a good thing, but the bad thing is that they still do it. Finally, we're just going to ask questions, but or answer questions. Whoops, am I going the wrong way? Oh, then anything you want to ask. I mean, anything. So, what is your role as a real estate licensee and realtor? What's your main role? the main job you have. Your job is to equip people to make decisions. I'll talk about this in a minute, but the number one way that real estate licensees get sued is when they stop being an equipper and they start being a decider. Remember when George Bush Light was president, and what did he used to say? I shouldn't call him George Bush Light. Remember when George W. Bush was president? What did he say? He said, "I'm the decider." Well, the consumer is the decider. And many, many times you'll find that real estate licensees are the decider. Your job is to be equipped. I'm pushing the wrong button. Yeah, you let them decide and you equip. Sorry, this was a new one, and I think I'm holding it backwards. Yeah, it was. Okay, so are there any current unappreciated risks in this current market? I mean, is this market different from any market you've seen before? Yeah, and there's some really significant things that pop up. Valuation is one big one. You heard the mortgage guy talk about it. Valuation is, I mean, the guy that did some work in our house was gonna list his house for $750. It's a 2-bedroom house. The second floor is where the second bedroom is, and you have to go upstairs to get there, but there's no door. So it's really a loft. He was gonna list it for $750. On a lark, he listed it for $1,050,000 or $1,030,000. It sold for $1,003,000. Not far from where your grandmother used to live, or Lindsay's grandmother used to live. Down the river. So, you know, if you have a cash deal, that's fine. If you have a mortgage, you got a problem. Valuation is a really, really big deal. And I tell you what I see often, and I see cases where there's a problem. If it's going smooth, you guys don't need me, but when it gets bumpy, I see the situation where there's been an offer, no inspection at all, but they still sneak over and they do the septic inspection, or they do one of the other inspections anyway, when you're not looking, or they ask it nicely, or they ask the seller nicely, and you're not involved. Then the inspection's done, and then they say, oh, there's $93,612.47 worth of stuff that needs to be done. What are we going to be doing here? We're going to talk about this inspection issue at big length today. We're also going to talk about inspections, whether you need them or don't need them. And when you have a conversation with a consumer that is a owner, you're the listing agent, are you really equipping or are you making an assumption? We're going to talk about 5407 and 3407 certificates, because the question I get about once a week from an agent is, can they be waived? And we're going to talk about the momentum of the market and how that may cause a problem for you. And then we're going to talk about fair housing. Now, everybody's an expert on fair housing because what was part of the continuing ed stuff that we had to do for this month's license renewal, fair housing. But how many of you have ever been in a fair housing case and seen it when the rubber hits the road, and it's not just some theoretical discussion in the CE courses that you're clicking through to get to the exam, and then you know that when you take the exam, if you didn't get it right, you just take it again a couple of times till you get it right. Isn't that how you did your CE online? I did. I have a broker's license, but I have a broker's license not for for selling real estate. About 6 years ago, I was sitting in Iron Hill with two of my goombas, Joe McGettigan and Joe Tarantino. Joe Tarantino was chair of the real estate commission at the time, and McGettigan was vice chair. And one of them said, "Hey, I don't think, why don't you have a license?" I said, "I just wouldn't use it." And McGettigan says, "I don't think you have the cojones to take the exam." And Tarantino says, "And I don't think you have to take the exam cold, no study, walk in." I said, "Of course I do." So he picks up his cell phone in Iron Hill. It's a Wednesday. He says, "Hey," calls the real estate commission. "Hey, Joe, put Jim Tupitza down, take a pressure tomorrow, 1 o'clock. He says, "Okay, go take the exam. You're signed up." So I took the exam. And I have a license. And that guy comes around, inspects my office every year. And then he goes to the beauty parlor next door and does that. So we're going to talk about all these things. Valuation. I saw this in the daily local news. Realtors say surge in house prices is likely to continue. Realtors Now, who did they talk to? Did they talk to any of you guys? And if they had talked to any of you guys, do you know that the surge in the prices is gonna continue? Do you have any special knowledge other than a feeling? So people see this kind of thing and they say, gee, this must be, this must be true somehow because some realtors have said it. I once saw a realtor quoted in the Daily Local News, and I had just had a jury trial where I was suing that realtor, that licensee, and my argument to the jury was, you see this guy? He's selling real estate. And did you hear him talk on the witness stand? This guy is as dumb as a rock. This guy should have been cleaning the floors in here. This guy is plain stupid and he doesn't know it. And that's how he made this mess. And that's how my client lost $235,000. And guess what? He lost. So look, we have the appraisal conundrum. How many of you have gotten appraisals in with the inflated prices with the escalation clauses that match the escalation clause in the contract? Anybody have one of those? You have one that matched it. So that means that the appraiser was actually given a contract with the escalation clause and they knew what the number was and they knew what to come back with. But imagine that they didn't have the contract, that they were just working blind. Do you think that they could hit the number? Probably not. No. I mean, I was talking to an agent that we represent in the middle of the state, and they were in shock because they sold his house. It was listed for $550 and it sold for $900. But it had a mortgage contingency. So even with his, his rising 80% LTV and PMI, that deal's just not going to close because the people don't have. They didn't look at the BFI to see whether the people have the cash to make the difference, because the people just did a BFI that said we have enough money to buy this house. Mm-hmm. Well, we have enough money to buy this house and we get an 80% LTV loan. So this is a big problem, and it's obviously something that's going to give you some problems. Inspections. Let me ask you a really simple question. You're the listing agent, and you have two offers in front of you. They are exactly the same price. The person has an 825 credit score. You can see it. They say it's cash. They show you their bank account so that you see that they have 5 times the amount of money that they need to buy this house. This one asks for inspections, and this one waives all inspections. Which deal is stronger? Waive? No. Why? Tell me why is that strong?
The only thing I can think is that they could come back and sue you and make it a hell later.
Well, so let's start with this, because this is really important. This is something that you need. If you don't learn anything else today, this is something that's really important. Who makes the decision that it's stronger? 99% of the time, it's the listing agents that say, well, this one's stronger because they waived inspections. Go back a couple slides. Are you the equipper or the decider when you do that? So let me give you real world for just a moment, because everybody talks about the theoretical things. I want you to imagine the real world where it is a failure to disclose case in litigation. Have any of you been in litigation involving failure to disclose? You never have. Okay, you're lucky. Often the buyer's agent gets sued as part of the process, saying that you didn't refer them to the proper inspections, that you didn't tell them that they needed a survey, that you didn't tell them that they needed an invasive stucco inspection, that you didn't tell them to do a hydraulic load test on the septic system. Various things that are equipping exercises. The seller's agent usually gets sued, but the seller's agent has to get out of jail free card. And that's because the seller's agent is only responsible for those matters of which the seller's agent has actual knowledge at the moment of closing. They don't have to do any inspections or evaluations or ask questions. So I want you to imagine, let's see, which one of you is going to be my defendant who's just sold a house and you accepted a contract from a buyer that did not want an inspection. And now you're, no, let's make it different. You've sold the house and now we have a buyer who waived inspections. Now I'm going to do it even different. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to see my head. We have a buyer that did not waive. you wanna be the buyer that did not waive inspections and you had already inspections? Okay, so you're suing this lady over here, saying that she failed to disclose things to you, and your lawsuit is violation of the Seller's Disclosure Act, negligent misrepresentation, fraudulent misrepresentation, innocent misrepresentation, and a violation of the Pennsylvania Unfair Trade Practices. Do you all understand what those 5 claims are?
Yes.
Violation of the Seller's Disclosure Act, you didn't fill it out. Fraudulent misrepresentation, what you said was downright a lie, and you knew it. Negligent misrepresentation, what you said, you should have been more careful, it was dangerous. Innocent misrepresentation. You know, the problem with innocent misrepresentation, by the way, there's only one remedy for the buyer, or for the buyer, it's rescission. You have to give the house back to the seller, and the seller has to give it the money. And then there's the unfair trade practices, which is trouble damages and attorney's fees. So now, so you're suing her over failure to disclose. So when you bought this house, you signed the contract to buy this house, you had a really good real estate agent, didn't you? You can answer, it's
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
Did you remember?
I thought I
Yeah,
did.
you did. You know me. And you picked a really good agent because you wanted to have the very best insurance.
Correct,
And you wanted to be equipped to make all the right decisions.
correct.
And you got a home inspection, didn't you? And the home inspector you were delighted with that home inspector because he was crawling up into the attic and he was going everywhere. You were happy with that, weren't you?
Well, they all do that, but sure.
Yeah. But you were happy with the report he gave you because in addition to the normal 44 pages of fluff,
But it had pictures.
it had pictures. And they were in color, weren't they? And you got to look at them real closely. And in fact, the pictures, when they went up into that crawl space up under the attic, you know, under the roof, they took pictures up there and you had those pictures as well. And you could see up there where there was a little staining on the wood and the leaf. And so.
Microbial growth.
Microbial. Well, I'll take you through that one in a minute. So you had this great inspector, that you didn't really find any microbial growth or any problems up in the attic, other than some old stains. No, right? But you're suing my client here, who's 87 years old. And I'm sorry. You know, usually, you know, they say that when you're at a restaurant and there's a woman there having a birthday party, like I saw yesterday, you know, you say happy birthday to her and you say, listen, you know, it's not really polite to ask you what your age is. So how much do you weigh? Anyway, but we're gonna pretend she's 87. She's 87 years old, and her husband hasn't looked good for the last 35 years. So you're suing my client and saying that they should have known better than that great inspector that you bought, and you had to come over there. That's what you're saying, isn't it?
Well, they've been living in the house
Yeah.
for 15
They've been living in the house, and you look at them, actually, they've been living in the house for 17 years and 3 days. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And you see how old they are? So what you're saying to me is that these people somehow defrauded you or made a misrepresentation, and it was so good that even this spectacular inspector that you hired couldn't find it. Isn't that what you're saying? But
That's my case.
you know, so what happens is this: if there is no inspections, what you have taken away from the seller is the #1 defensive cross-examination tool if they get sued. You take it away. I have done this cross-examination, you know, 100 times, more than that. If I don't have that tool because the inspections were waived, I'm sitting there saying, well, my client is, you know, were you able to get up in the attic? And usually my client is like, I don't know. I said, well, don't you remember what I told you when you were in my office?
Just to be clear, you're saying take the offer of no inspection.
No.
Like we said. in your
No,
document.
no. What I'm saying is equip the seller to make the decision, and you tell them that, look, on first blush, no inspection sounds good, but it might not be good.
Why would it not?
It might not be good because if you have an offer and it has no inspections, and they don't do any inspections, and now they want to sue for that the seller's disclosure was inappropriate, they can't have this cross-examination at trial, which can defeat the case. You don't have to raise your hand, you talk.
Well, on the seller's disclosure, doesn't it say on the bottom of it that it is filled out to the best of the
Well,
ability?
that doesn't take the question, believe me. I have been in hundreds of these kinds of cases. There's a course that the Pennsylvania Bar Institute teaches called Litigating the Failure to Disclose Case. Jim Goldsmith and I teach that. And if you know Jim Goldsmith, he's counsel of the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors and has been forever. And we are often in these cases together. He'll be defending the seller or the real estate licensee, and I'll have we go back and forth. We play tag team on these things. I will tell you, here's what I would be saying. Oh, here's one of the ladies from my office. I'm gonna have her join me. Where are you, Vicky? Anyway, here's what I would be saying to the seller. I would be saying, listen, there are 2 offers on this property, or 5 or 30. And some of these, we have to first deal with on financial terms. We want to look at the credit score, the ability to perform. Does this person really have a house to sell and they haven't really sold it yet? And so are they really giving us something that might really be contingent upon another house sale? And if we have a problem, we're going to have a zipper. Or is this a situation where everything else is equal except the inspection clauses? And so let me equip you to make a decision on that, because I'm not going to be the decider. If you waive inspections, that makes it easier, because you're then not going to be in the dance where they go do the inspections, then they come back to you with a copy of the report, and then they ask for these repairs, or this, that, and the other thing, and you're not in that dance. So you've avoided that dance. On the other hand, by avoiding that dance on inspection issues, you are putting yourself in a position where you have made the slightest misrepresentation, you're going to be in court, and the #1 tool that your lawyer is going to want to help defend you, to get you out of the mud, is missing, because they can't cross-examine the buyer and have them agree that their inspection was certainly better than what you could have provided. So you need to decide which one of these. I'm not going to express an opinion, because there are things that go in the balance both ways. That's what I would do, yes.
A lot of times in contracts where the buyers have waived the inspection, we have a form that they sign. Basically, the buyer is signing it saying that they understand that it's their decision, that they're waiving inspections. How does that play into all of this?
I still can't cross-examine, right? I say, so you waived inspections, but their argument is going to still be, this person still lied. And I waived inspections because they lied.
How can they prove that they lied?
Well, I'll give you a good example. They go down into the basement, and the seller's disclosure says, we've had no water problems at all. So they go down into the basement, and there's this drywall down in the basement. It's been there 4 or 5 years. And they decide that they're gonna put up a big screen TV. So they chop a hole in the drywall, and behind it is the pine, siding, the paneling. And it has a funny smell to it. So they take the baseboard off and they get down to the bottom, and all that pine paneling is rotted down near the bottom, where the water has been damaging it for years. That's how they prove it. I'll give you another one. Guys, my client bought a house, did the inspections, did the water inspection. In fact, the realtor made sure he got a water inspection, but the water well test did not measure the flow of water in the well. So guy buys the guy buys the house. He's really excited because he's been on a submarine the last 5 years. He's out of the Navy, and here he is. He gets in the house, been working outside, gets in the shower, got a little bit of water, and then it's gone. He feels like he's back on the USS whatever, USS Minnow, I think. And so he comes to me. I contacted the seller, and the seller said, I've never had problems with water ever. I love it when they say never. Never is the best word, because when they're on cross-examination, never is the word that will bite them hard. But anyway, I never had, in fact, wrote me a letter. I always had plenty of water. There was no problem. The well must have conked out in 30 days after between me moving out and closing. So my client is out doing some yard work, trying to figure out how to do this. And the well guy has told him, it's gonna be really hard to get my machine onto your property because it's this big hill and it's gonna be really difficult to get there. And your septic system is out front. So I have to get into the back of the property for a new well. And it's gonna be, you know, might cost as much as $30,000 because I'm gonna have some problems. So anyway, so my client is out doing some work and he's in an absolute panic about the $30,000. And little Johnny is out there by the fence, and Johnny's about 6, 7 years old. And he says, hi neighbor. How come you don't come to my house like Uncle Bobby did? Who's Uncle Bobby? Uncle Bobby used to live in your house. Oh, because I'm not a relative. Gee, Uncle Bobby always came here to take his showers every day at our house. I'm missing Uncle Bobby. And then he would always get some big things of water to take up so he had water to drink. Do you need me to help you carry some water up? I can put it in my wagon like I do for Uncle Bobby.
Well, that's pretty blatant, but.
Yeah, but it happens all the time. And we had one last year where all of a sudden the parts of the ceiling started falling down. Well, they couldn't figure out what was up there. When the inspector came, there was no trap door with the steps to come down. What the people had done was they'd gone to a store and gotten those blue plastic tubs and laid them out all over upstairs. And then they drywalled over the spot where the stairs used to be, just sealed it all off. So you think that people are not devious. I'm telling you, they're devious and you gotta be careful. What percentage of stucco inspections fail? What percentage of invasive stucco inspections fail?
Minor and major, a lot.
Almost 100%. Almost 100%. So you got a person that's in a wave inspection and they're looking and they're buying a house that is a 1995 house built with stucco and it has these cracks, not these holes, that's the inspection, but it has streaks running down below the windows and you go inside, there's a little water coming in. Why would you waive that inspection? Because what's it gonna cost to repair it? We're getting ready, I don't know, this is Kenny Batak. She's a lawyer in our office. She's just not admitted in Pennsylvania, so she's paralegal at the moment. But we have a case where one of our other paralegals is getting set up for the mediation. And the mediation is about the stucco damage. The representation by the seller was that we completely remediated the stucco. And my clients then didn't bother to have an inspection. And their agent told them that they didn't need an inspection because it had been remediated. You never say to anybody you don't need that. Cut that out of your mouth. So we have the price. What do you think the price is to remediate the stucco in this house that we're working on?
150,000.
No, higher,
150.
higher,
It's the whole house.
higher,
250.
higher,
300.
higher,
500.
900.
How big is that house?
Big house in Villanova. But you know what?
It's always done.
It doesn't matter. The only difference between a $900,000 house and a $90,000 house is that you better have enough insurance as a licensed agent. So that's what happens. This stucco thing, it's a big deal. So, you know, you see somebody that waives an inspection. If I'm the seller, I should have done the inspection before I listed the property. I should have hired the best inspector to come out. I should have run the title on the property. We had a closing yesterday. You guys know Dominic Cardone?
Yeah.
Dominic's office called because they were at a closing. He's an old friend of mine. And there was a trailing mortgage on the title. Nobody noticed it. The title report came in. Nobody noticed it. Nobody saw it. No, I think it's slide over there so you can see the screen. Nobody noticed it. Then they got to closing, and there's this old mortgage. It was Philadelphia Mortgage Company assigned a bunch of times to ABN AMRO. Well, it's a pretty bad time to look at it at the time of closing. I'd rather have a title report beforehand and have spent $200 to pay for the search or done it in some fashion. I'd rather know. I'd rather do the inspection beforehand so I know what kind of things that I need to clean up. And I probably would attach that inspection report to my seller's disclosure just to beef it up. Because the more you say, and a seller's disclosure, there you are. I always say to realtors, when people are doing seller's disclosures, what they should do, and you should tell them to do this, is to go around that house and spend 15 minutes in every room in the house, including the garage, sitting on the floor, looking around. Oh, we changed this outlet. Oh, in this bathroom, we put one of those GCFI things in. List everything. Spend 15 minutes in every room. In 2002, we were selling our house, and I sat down at the kitchen table and filled out the seller's disclosure in about 20 minutes. And my wife, who had sat through many of these programs with different brokerage companies, looked at me and said, "So you don't practice what you preach? So you're gonna get us sued, is that what you're saying?" So we went around and I spent 15 minutes on the floor in every room in the house, and the seller's disclosure was substantially different, substantially. So that's critical. 3407 certificate. I'm not gonna go through all these points, but I put them all up there because there are 17 things that are supposed to be on a certificate. By the way, there's 3407 condo, 4407 co-op, and there are actually some co-ops in Pennsylvania, and 5407 homeowners association. These are all the things that these things are supposed to contain. And we're gonna go back, yes,
Before you get on, can I just ask one more question about
Yeah,
the inspections?
sure.
Okay, oftentimes I send a list to the prospective buyer of different inspection companies or suggestions that they've used, all right? And then they may look at them, they may call them themselves, or they may say you choose, all right? Is it okay, like I just sold a house in there in Texas, and they said, I did text them and I said, listen, do you want me to send you a list of inspections or you know the plan? And they said, no, texting that, no, we would like you to choose. Is that good
So
enough?
they want you to not be an equiper, and they want you to be a decider.
So that's not
So-
good. So I
so
can
the-
make them
The
choose.
answer to the question is this: look, if it's a mold test that they want to have done, and you're sending them to the person you know is, like, if somebody calls me, I have the same issues, and they want a mold test, I say, listen, go to Bill Young at Mold and More, I don't trust anybody else because I've had him on the witness stand 40 times, and nobody can shake him. He doesn't beat around the bush, he just does it. So if you know that about the person, you can take a risk, but you're taking the risk. So you have to decide where you want to cross the line from being an equiper to being a decider. I know that with home inspectors, I've sued most of them at one point or another, because you have to, they get dragged into litigation. So I just say to people, look, these are the three that I sued the least, give me a number, 1 to 3. And they always ask this question, which is the one that you sued the most? Who did you sue the most? Yeah.
They're not business.
I will tell you, it's a fruit.
But you know, the home inspectors always make them sign something saying they're only liable for the cost of the inspection. But that means nothing basically, is what
Right.
you're saying,
Yeah.
because you still can sue them.
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
So let me just ask you guys something about this. How do you guys know whether the reserves are adequate for this community?
There is no way.
I don't know.
Well, so when you tell somebody, oh, the 3407 or the 5407 looks good, that first of all, that's something you should never say. You should have them look at it. But if you look in, where is it, section 60611 of RELRA, it says that if you don't have, no, that's legal. It's one of the sections anyway. It says if you don't have the abilities in an area, you have a duty to refer to somebody who has the ability. It's part of the duties of all agents in the Licensing and Registration Act. This is one where you may need to say to somebody, look, we need to make sure you have enough reserves. I will tell you very simply, let's go to Willistown Township. There's a community there that's talking about restucking the entire outside of everything. The association's responsible for it, and they're debating whether it's gonna be a $40,000 or $50,000 special assessment for the units. It's because they didn't have adequate reserve. If your client just bought a property there last week and they didn't know about proposed capital expenditures because the vote wasn't until this morning. Everybody's been talking about it for the last 3 years. Where are you? So these three right here, 4, 5, and 6, those are the things that require the most attention, and they're the ones that can bite you the hardest. And those are the ones where I've had to defend realtors because they didn't mention anything about whether the reserves were adequate, and they didn't say, look, you really need to have somebody look at these reserves, I can't tell you. So,
I have a question.
yes,
So one of the last houses I sold, it was cash, it was over 100,000 over asking, and one of their requirements was for the buyers to sign the year-old HOA docs to be accepted, because there were other people right behind us that were willing to sign the HOA docs, not the current ones, the ones that they pulled in your.
it's non-waivable. What you're describing is a waiver of section 5407. The legislature said this about it. Is it waivable? No, it's not waivable. So here's the problem. You have a listing agent there who didn't know what was going on. And look, sometimes you're dealing with listing agents, and the only reason they're a listing agent is because it's one of their friends wants to sell a house, and it's the first thing that they've ever done, and probably the last one they're ever going to do. Because they're not up here getting these awards. They're not even sitting in these meetings because they're busy doing other things. It's non-waivable. So the issue is this. Let's imagine that you do sign it. You play along with the game. Okay, you sign it. And now you get a new 5407 certificate. The question is, do you have 5 days in which to cancel? And the answer is absolutely yes.
Oh, so even though they signed the old ones, they could still cancel once they get the new ones, if.
Because you don't have a new one with a current budget. You don't have any unpaid amounts in there. There's a lot of these things that can
There's
change.
no balance sheet.
Yeah, no balance sheet.
Yeah.
So if all they're doing is signing that,
Absolutely. It's not a big deal now.
Yeah, it's
That's
not a
good
big
to
deal.
know.
okay,
Because that seems to be the way things are headed, or
Yeah.
were heading. Like you either sign this or.
and that's dysfunction. It's the momentum of the market. The market is moving us into areas where everything is more and more dangerous because they're trying to pull you away from being the equiper to being the decider. Now, let me give you a simple decider issue. And I hear this all the time. I'm buying a house here in Pennsylvania. Do I need a survey? I'm moving here from New Jersey where we always get surveys. Do I need a survey?
You want survey.
No, well, the answer is
Required.
what
Not required.
not required. Okay, so let me tell you what 90% of agents say. They say, no, in Pennsylvania, it's not required. That is making a decision. That's making a decision that you don't need a survey. So I want you to imagine that the person that's buying that property buys it now and discovers that their driveway is on the neighbor's property, and the neighbor is going to sue them the next day to get rid of that driveway. Or that their house isn't even on the property at all. And I've had that. Or that, here was a really good one. The property doesn't even exist. We had one where it was all these lots in the subdivision, and the surveyor that did the subdivision started measuring 200 feet on the other side of the road where he had a marker that he found. And as he did these lots, these people bought these lots. This fellow purchased this last lot right before the Pico right of way, but it didn't exist because all those lines moved. And suddenly he found there's a house built right next to the Pico right of way, and there was no room for his lot. If he had a survey, so the answer to the moral of the story is this: equipping means to say to somebody, listen, it's not required in Pennsylvania. It's not like Jersey where it's a drive-by shooting. It's not a real survey anyway. But if you do not get a survey, you are taking the risk that that your property doesn't exist, that your house is on the other lot, that the other lot's on your property, that there's an easement or right of way that you don't know about. I'll give you one, real case. No disclosures of anything with regard to the survey. The title report says that there's a pipeline easement to Sunoco in the backyard. Nobody thought much about it. And people moved into the house in Wickford. And next thing they knew, this sound wall was being erected 6 inches away from the back of their house. And the next thing they knew, Sunoco, as part of Mariner East 2, was in the backyard setting up the HDMI drilling rig, and it sat there running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 2.5 years. might want to have a survey to know that Sunoco has that thing there, and I might want to read their easement. And, oh, and let me go on a little tangent on this, because this is, this didn't happen in that case. But I want you to imagine that you have taken a listing on a property where there was a Sunoco easement or some other easement, and they signed the agreement and they got the money. Or maybe it's a bigger property and they put the property in Act 319 in order to get the taxes down because it's more than 10 acres. And they signed the standard Par 4 agreement of sale. Are they in default? Is it the seller? Are they or are they not in default the minute they sign the contract? They are. Here's why. And this is something you really be careful on. If somebody has done something, put it, given an easement to the neighbor for something or other. The contract says that they will give a deed of special warranty. That means that they're gonna warrant that they didn't do anything to diminish the title while they were an owner. So that contract really needs to have a carve out in it. It needs to say, we're gonna give a deed of special warranty, carving out this easement that we gave to the neighbor whose driveway is on our property. And then when they get to closing, and you have the deed that the title company prepares, you have to go down to that paragraph, it's the special warranty, and you have to say, accepting and excluding from said warranty, this easement. Let me give you a real world in that. Client bought a house in West Whiteland Township near Ship Road, and the seller had just done a deal with Sunoco and gotten $55,000 because the pipeline Mariner East was going through. My client bought the property, next thing he knows from the neighbors that Mariner East going through. He looks at his deed. I call the seller up and I say, you breached your warranty. And here's the good news. You did something to quantify the damages. You got $55,000 from Sunoco, so that's what our damages are, because that's what you took. And then who did he sue? The seller sued his listing agent for not equipping him to deal with the special warranty. So I wasn't gonna talk about that today, but that's one of those little things, put that in your mind. And when you're listing, you ask somebody, have you given an easement to somebody? Is there a pipeline that's gone through? Is there any change, anything that you've recorded against this property? And by the way, if they have already ordered a title and they've looked at it before they listed, it's gonna show probably, yes.
I have a question. So when you're taking a listing, would it be good for you to do a lien judgment search prior to?
Well, lien and judgment,
$75.
lien and judgment is only gonna show you money. It's not gonna show, it's just gonna show you mortgages and judgment. It's not gonna show you easements. And it's not gonna show you Act 319.
Okay. So you have to do a full title search for that?
Yeah. So you
A
know,
lot of sellers won't do that.
well, and you tell them. It's not a problem because, the lady that I talked to, yesterday, well, actually, we had one of these last week, and we just finished it, what, Monday? With the doctor that sold her house, had to put $20,000 in escrow to deal with his old mortgage. So it cost her $4,000 to clean that up. But she saved the $250 that she would have had to pay to buy a title report. That's great, isn't it?
But now the disclosure also asks if there are easements.
Yeah, but people,
We
How many
don't
people-
know. You can't have it both ways.
yes, you can. Here's why. Because if you don't equip them so they know what they're talking about, this is all specialized language. Believe me, I've had realtors on the witness stand torn apart on what did you do to equip this person? What exactly did you do to equip? You agree with me that you didn't mention where an easement was. You assumed that this client of mine knew what an easement was.
Truthfully though, we're not lawyers.
I know you're not.
So
And so,
the problem with what you just said is that we are not specialized. And we could say to our client, and it actually says, doesn't it? You should get legal help if you don't know.
I'm with you completely. How many people refer buyers to lawyers? Because we screw up every deal, don't we? I mean, that's what you tell them, yeah. You tell them, we're gonna clear the deal. Actually, the irony is, when I'm teaching to lawyers, I say, listen, you're representing a buyer. And you can go through and you can probably find something that'll screw up the deal. And then when your client's living in the Holiday Inn, see how much they appreciate it. They want to move into this house. So they just want to know what the risks are, and they want to make the decisions as to which ones they're going to assume. They don't want you to protect them from whatever might happen. It's just not an issue. Fair housing,
We have another problem, too,
Yeah.
though. I mean, if we explain what an easement is, I mean, we have to get another document out and say this is,
yeah, okay,
and
so.
have them sign that.
Let's go to the law.
Because they'll say we never said it.
So let's go to the law. We're gonna go to the railroad, real estate licensing and registration act. How many of you keep a copy of the little booklet that the real estate commission prints called Real Estate Licensing and Registration Act and the regulations at your fingertips so you can grab them? If you were in my office, they're right there, because I am in there every day of the week, all the time. You should have those. The real estate commission prints it out as a little booklet. You should have it. One of the things in there, if you go into duties of all agents, it's subsection number 11 of that. It says that you have to explain the applicability of the law in the transaction to the consumer. Then they tried to decide, well, what does that mean? And so they wrote a regulation, 39 point something or another, that describes how to do that. Here's the brilliant description of a committee of the legislature. You have a duty to explain the applicability of the law to the transaction to the consumer without practicing law.
Yeah, that's exactly what you're saying.
Exactly what you're just saying. I understand that. So the issue is this. Okay, so you're gonna divide this up. Do you know what an easement is? No, you don't? Do you know how to use Google?
So you're placing it on the buyer now?
I'm just saying that you need to equip people to understand what they're doing in situations. If you don't equip them, and look, a lot of times the answer is, look it up in Google. There's all kinds of articles about it. I mean, I wrote 10 that are out there in the internet about easements and paper streets and all kinds of nonsense. People find them all the time.
My question is, can they look that up on the county website to see if there are, look
Yeah,
at their
the
deed?
recorder of
Look at
deeds
that
office, recorder of deeds office is available online.
That's what they should,
So
rely for them to do that.
I would want to go in there and make sure and look what they have and what they've done. Yeah, let them, tell them, all you have to do is search by their name or search by their tax parcel number and everything should pop up. Fair housing, I don't want to miss this for a second. None of you have been in a fair housing lawsuit, have you? We almost had one last week where the lady was renting a house. She had made the agreement, they signed the lease, she'd given $6,000 as an advance payment towards the rent because, and it had come from the housing authority because this woman didn't really have a lot of money and they didn't want her homeless. And then she asked about her emotional support aid. And everything came screeching to a halt. Everything came screeching to a halt. Fortunately for the lady, it unhalted and it got going because I think somebody smelled a rat. I'm going to give you 2 examples of real fair housing cases. We represent a brokerage company in Chinatown. 99.9999% of the people with whom they do business are a minority. And they had done a lease for this fellow up on Norris Street in North Philadelphia near Temple. Years before, he was their customer. He was their client also, because both of those definitions under railroad. He came in and he said, listen, I want to move, and I see your sign on that building over there. And the agent said, well, that's our sign from when we had it listed years ago, but we haven't taken the sign down because it's 45 feet up in the air, but we don't have a listing on it, but I'll call. He calls the owner, and the owner says, no, I got a tenant there, and I'm busy trying to evict him, he doesn't want to go in. So I can't show you. This guy gets mad because I said, I want to see that property. The agent says, I can't show it to you. And listen, I got to run right now, but I can try to find you some other properties. So then the consumer starts pounding the agent with a lot of emails. I want to see this, I want to see that. And the agent says, listen, I'm going to have you see these things with somebody else in my office because I work at the Quiznos in Northeast Philadelphia from 9 in the morning until 7 o'clock at night because my brother-in-law owns it and I'm his manager. And then I leave there and I go to a bar 7 days a week where I work until 2 in the morning. So the only time I have time to deal with real estate is between 6 in the morning when I wake up and 9 when I have to be at Quiznos. So I'm going to give you this nice woman and she's going to show you the property. What did you want to see? So she takes him to a property in South Philadelphia. The guy parks out in front of a fire hydrant right in front of the building, and she says, well, that's a fire hydrant. He pulls out his badge and says, I work for the mayor. I'm untouchable. Oh, okay. So she's taking him through the house, and she's noticing as they're going through the house, he's looking at not the house, but he's going, checking her out. And this is a devout Chinese Christian woman who is married, and she is as straight as anyone you will ever meet in your life. If you want to know where she is Sunday morning, 17 years ago, I will tell you where she was 17 years ago on Sunday morning, and I'll tell you where she's going to be this Sunday morning at 10 o'clock in the morning as well. She'll be in Sunday school at 10, and she'll be in church at 12, at 11. It's as simple as that, this straight arrow. So this guy looks at her and says, listen, you know, why don't we just leave here and we'll go get some dinner someplace? Because you look like you'd be a real fine dessert. She gets in her car and just runs away. But she tells all the girls in the office. So he calls the office the next day morning to have her show more properties. And he's told, no, you can't see the house. We won't show you anything. He takes that as, oh no, because of your race, we're not going to show you anything. They mean it as because of your pig style and the fact that you're a disgusting, revolting pig, we're not going to show you any properties. And he comes in and he's screaming at everybody, but they won't show him properties. And he then finds out that the house that was the apartment became available and somebody else rented it, and he didn't, and he's not the one that got it. So he sued our client for fair housing violation. And he goes all through the trial. And he says, well, this is pretext discrimination. And they did it because I'm black. And that's the only reason. And the people in my client's office said, you know, I mean, we're a minority too. We don't care. I mean, we deal with everybody except white people. I mean, we don't have any white clients. It's just our lawyer. He's a token. So what happens is this: when you're in fair housing court, federal court, the judge is always going to find that there's some pretext discrimination and award a minimal amount of money. So the judge awarded him $5,000, and you think, oh, okay, that's the end. Except in fair housing cases, you also get to collect your attorney's fees. I have never seen an attorney submit a bill for less than $100,000.
Wow. Wow.
This guy submitted one for 150, about 150, maybe 110,000. And I was shocked that the judge only gave me 25,000. I saw the judge at a social event in Philadelphia about a month or two later. And I said, Judge, 25,000. Judge said, you disrespected my courtroom. Did you see on the first day when we took the break in the morning? He was walking back and forth in front of the well of my courtroom, back and forth. And he had a piece of toilet paper stuck to his shoe. That's wrong. But he says it got worse. I said, how could it get worse? He said the second day of trial, he had a piece of toilet paper hanging down from his hands. And he walked back and forth with that tail wagging. He said, that was a $75,000 mistake on that lawyer's part. So that's what happens in these. We had another one where people bought an apartment complex, 3 towers. They were in terrible condition. The elevators were down almost every day, maybe one day a month. And there was only one elevator for each tower. So my client said out of notice, saying, listen, we're going to repave the parking lot. We're going to put a new elevator in. The elevator is going to be out of service for 2 to 3 months. We're going to put all new windows. We're going to put all new heating and air conditioning. We're going to fix this place up beautifully. There's a lady on the 4th floor that was in a wheelchair, and she never bothered, and they never bothered to ask about how she's going to get out. And they had a vacant apartment on the 1st floor. So their argument was that the landlord should have gone to her and made her an offer of space because he knew that they knew that an accommodation was necessary. But these guys had just bought the building, so they didn't even know who the tenant was. They didn't even get through all their census. So in any event, that was a 6-figure award to the lady and 6 figures to the attorneys.
I have a question.
Yes,
So for that agent who wouldn't show because of his inappropriate behavior, if she had documented somehow, if she had sent him an email or a text message and said, sorry, but you're inappropriate and I don't feel comfortable, if she had somehow documented it
it
in
would
her
have helped.
office, would have helped her?
It would have helped. She didn't do it. She was so incensed. And her husband wanted to go over and find this guy and you know, beat him to a pulp. I mean, seriously.
Isn't it always helpful if you're like, if she would have like sued first?
You know what? When you sue somebody for sexual harassment, you're crawling into the sewer. Because then they're gonna bring out everything in your life that you ever did. Oh, so you cheated in spelling in 7th grade. And in 2nd grade, you pulled that girl's hair that was sitting there. I mean, it's, yeah, unless you're a celebrity, it's better to deal with other ways. So where's the line between practicing law and not practicing law? This is at subsection 11 under relevant, where it says you have to advise them of tasks, compliance with the laws. Here is what I have seen in court. And what happens is if you get sued, you're gonna be in court and it's gonna be in front of a panel of arbitrators, which is 3 lawyers trying to decide whether you poached their turf. So what's the line as I see it? I see it's a problem, not a problem, I should say, if all you do is fill out a PAR form, standard agreement of sale, you know, the ASR, that form, you fill it out, you do a change in terms addendum, you do any of the standard forms that PAR has, I don't see a major problem with that because that's what you have a license to do. But when you're writing an escrow agreement, I have never seen a real estate licensee write a good escrow agreement except for one guy, a short little guy that I mentioned earlier in my comments, and then I yelled at him for writing an escrow agreement. And Dominic will tell you that. You shouldn't be writing escrow agreements. That's crossing the line. And I'm gonna tell you, they are all, when you guys do it, they're always wrong. They never deal with it correctly. Let's imagine, you get to that last page of the agreement of sale, and there's that big blank area there. You know, if you're putting in something that is capable of being written in a C-spot run sentence, a sentence with a subject, verb, object, no commas, no semicolons, you probably get away with it. The first time it needs a comma or a semicolon, have a lawyer look at it. Now, so how do you do that? There's a lot of lawyers around that know nothing about real estate. It's just like, I know nothing about criminal. I mean, if you got arrested and came to my office, you know what I would say to you? I would say, bring a toothbrush and clean underwear. But there are guys around.
I went through like a similar.
Yeah, see, because you'd be going away if I was defending you. I'd be saying to the jury, she did it, put her in jail. So my point is this. I don't know how many of you have I mean, I talk to Lindsay with some degree of regularity. Her father is my client, so I deal with Lindsay, and I get other people that call from other offices. You know, if it's a simple question, a simple thing, costs like next to nothing. Many times I just answer the question. You know, I get that other question, can the 5407 be waived? I get that all the time. I just answer the question.
Wait,
and then-
can I chime in really?
Yeah.
For like a hot sec? Do you guys I don't know if any of you remember this email that I sent out the one time. I was representing the buyer, went through inspections, gave the deposit, mortgage commitment was coming, seller said they changed their mind. I called Jim. He said, you tell them they're responsible for X, Y, and Z. See what they said. The next day, they called me back. We're still good, Lindsay, we're able to move forward.
Wow.
So it took me 5 minutes, not even, for just to have that information. 98% of the office was like, oh, I'm sorry, it is what it is, it happens. It happens. I have a month wrapped up in this deal. Like, it is. I'm sorry, I'm not giving up yet. So, yeah, just
Can I ask a question on that?
What was that two lines?
Commission,
What?
Oh, they
commission,
still had.
title fees,
Yeah.
inspections.
And when I win the lawsuit, you're gonna be selling me the house in 5 years or 3 years at today's price. And you're gonna be paying all the money to fix this house up, to bring it to where it is now. So how will you like that? Because if the interest rates go up, and gosh, it's 2.5% now, it might go up. You're gonna be paying that difference, and how do you feel about that on a $375,000 mortgage over 30 years? If you're paying 4% on that because you screwed up, because you just changed your mind.
Is that written that well, obviously you brought up the rent for the fire, so your commission is true and in fact.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And then the title fees, like, and all that other stuff.
Title search.
They are all the damages that a buyer's gonna have if, and if a buyer's selling. Look, we've had many cases where we have a buyer suing the seller over those kinds of things. And these are the range of the damage that we cover. We've had situations where we have a seller suing a buyer. 2 years ago, for the now deceased judge in Kennett Square, he sued a buyer and we got a $1.6 million verdict. So, these things happen. Look, the last thing you want to have these consumers be involved in is lawyering. They don't want to get tangled up. When you go to court, there's two things that will happen. You're going to spend 5 times more money than you think you want to, or that you think you will, and you're going to have a fight with your spouse. And it's going to be your fault. Okay? So it's as simple as that. So be really careful about this practicing law thing. I said, where's the line? Let me blast through some of the things in here because I know you guys have had tons and tons of training on this, but I'm going to talk about fuel, title order, mortgage contingency, inspections and septic, and I'm going to hit the inspections, septic, those kind of things less. Paragraph 7. Paragraph 7 has some language in it. Let's see if this is doing it right. Oh, I blew up part of it right here. Any remaining heating and cooking fuel stored on the property, who gets those? The buyer. We had a case years ago where the seller was really smart. He didn't think he was going to move, so he puts like a 2,000-gallon oil tank in the backyard. He was really excited about it, but then they decided he didn't transfer. So he made sure he didn't fill it, but he didn't tell his wife. So he's off in Houston on business, looking at the house where they're going to be relocating, and she sees the tank there, and she sees it's empty, so she orders fuel. She gets filled with fuel right before closing. Can you go in there and pump it out? The problem is that from an environmental point of view, nobody wants to pump it out, and it's not worth doing. So this is kind of important when the fuel costs are where they are today, and that's something that's old. That's been in there, since it was a little change in 2020, but that's something that needs attention. Propane tanks. Do you ever spend time figuring out who owns the propane tank? Yeah, big problem, isn't it? Because if you don't own the propane tank, how much extra are you paying for propane? If I'm buying the house from you, I don't want your propane tank. But the company's gonna say, well, there's a lease, it was, it's only gonna be for 99 years, so it'll be fine. And you're only gonna be paying us $45 a gallon, 45 cents a gallon more, so it'll be fine. Address that. When you're listing a property, ask the person, do you own the tank and do you have the written receipt? Because you can't go and sign up for propane anyplace without the written receipt for the tank. Title order. This is something that's new in the contract. It goes back to almost what we said before. This requires the buyer to order the title within 5 days and give the seller a copy. It used to be that people would sometimes not order the title until they got a little closer to closing. They were done with the inspections. They had the mortgage lined up. Everything was fine. Well, that's a breach of the contract. 7 days, unless you fill in a different number there, you've got to order the title and you have to give it to the seller. And the idea is that the seller doesn't have the problem of which I just spoke, a trailing mortgage that didn't get satisfied. Mortgage contingency. I see mortgage contingency questions with spectacular irregularity, and that's because of this section. Financing according to the following terms. Yet nobody goes and applies for a mortgage according to the following terms. You know, they'll think, no, I'm applying for less, so I'm okay. Well, no, you're in breach of the contract because it says you're gonna go apply at this number. And somebody's gonna go into pissant mode and give you trouble over it. Yeah, you've got to match. Now, can you go also apply for one for less? Of course. You can have 4 or 5 mortgage applications pending. But if they're gonna go get a different kind of mortgage, this is where you need a change in terms and addendum and keep them in sync and keep them matched up so that they don't have a problem. Yes,
Does the loan to value of the mortgage contingency help if it doesn't appraise?
it does.
You don't need the appraisal contingency because it'll throw that out of whack, that covers it.
Exactly. I believe it does. Now, I'm not gonna give you an absolute on that because when you have a trial, over an issue, you have a judge that may know nothing about real estate and may get, go off base and you may be spending $25,000 to go to the Superior Court that you don't want to do. But generally speaking, that LTV thing deals with it.
How about the interest rate? Interest rates are all over the board right now.
Well, interest rates aren't all over the board, they're going up. And they're not going down and they're not staying the same and they're going up. So I remember the days when somebody would get a mortgage commitment and they would come in the office and thank God, I only have to pay 16% of my mortgage. This is 1982. Sandy and I were babies at the time. We were in kindergarten together. Don't tell about it. But there were people that were delighted to get that. But in those days, you'd have somebody saying that they're going to apply for a mortgage at 14%, but they'll take something up to 18%. Now, those are pretty outrageous numbers today, but there's some people that know that they're not outrageous over the course of a long period of time. So you need to make sure that you're going to be guessing the time to close and the time to that they can lock. They may be able to get a 60-day, 90-day lock. Yes.
I just, on the recent one, I had worked it out with the buyer agent that they would lock within a week.
And did you do a change of terms addendum to make that part of the contract?
No, so how it was in the, he put in special clauses, the buyer will lock their rate within a week.
Good. And that's really important in this market today. So you just said what I was gonna say in a minute.
Oh,
So,
okay.
good, you're right on it, because that's what we were doing back in 2008, that's what we were doing. Every time that the market has done one of those dips, and that kept things successful.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that again?
The buyer will lock their mortgage rate, the buyer will lock the rate within a week.
Of agreement of sale. Signed.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, if they're buying new construction, you have to deal with a longer term, you have to deal with whether or not the house is gonna be delivered at all, or delivered with something missing. I mean, we've had a lot of new construction properties delivered with cardboard instead of garage doors, or plywood instead of garage doors, because the garage doors are in such bad order. We had one a few weeks ago. I went through the walkthrough with the people as their friends, and the kitchen cabinets came from the store up in Thorndale, the Habitat for Humanity store, where I go every Saturday. We go there on Saturdays with the pickup truck and we donate stuff in the back. And then I go around the front and I see my wife buying what we donated last week. But we love Habitat, so we're glad to do that. But a lot of things that are in these houses are coming from there. So this is really important. Inspections. I want you to look at this inspection, because there's this question about who can be there for the inspection. Can the father-in-law of one of the buyers, or the father of one of the buyers, come through because he's the builder? Well, there it is. And buyer has 2 pre-settlement inspections, very limited purpose, and can't be waived. And I love it when people say, no, you can't do a pre-settlement walkthrough. Well, it can't be waived. This is a change. This language is a change from where it was 2 years ago. So that's post-pandemic language about who can go in there and who do the inspections. Paragraph 12 and paragraph 13 of the contract are in conflict. And I'm jumping out of order with these numbers. 12 basically says the seller has the right to, upon request, to receive a free copy of the inspection report. How many sellers do you know that don't want the inspection report? Won't take it if it's poison, you know, not touching that, because if the deal blows up, what do they have to do? And if that inspection report came from somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, it makes it worse. So what is the other paragraph? What does 13 say? It says, if everything goes well, the buyer will present the inspection report. If everything is unsatisfactory, the buyer will present. If, you know, the buyer will present. These are in conflict with one another. You need to know it and you need to think about it. If I'm a seller, I'm gonna say, that the obligations under paragraph 13 to present these things are only applicable if we make a request. Only applicable if we make a request, because 90% of the time, I don't want to know. I'm this guy, I don't want to know. I have seen, you all have probably seen inspections where you look at it and say, did he go through the right house? I mean, I don't get this.
Now, Jim, can you put that in, can a seller put that in writing that says that they don't want to?
They can, and that's a change in terms.
Right,
So that's a counter offer.
yeah.
And that needs to be signed by the buyer because it's a counter offer and you don't have a contract until it's accepted.
Okay.
And not only accepted, but the acceptance delivered to you and you have it in writing.
So if you attach change in terms addendum with the offer saying that, you know, or buyer won't ask for any repairs and all that, where's that kind of like? Like, we'll present the report if you want it, but we won't present it to anybody else.
Yeah, I mean,
Is that kind of like,
As
get
the
rid of
listing
it?
agent, then I would follow up with that next sentence.
yeah, exactly.
As the listing agent, then she's saying that what if you
So
have
a
a
lot of times
buyer
we
that
do,
say
like,
informational purposes
There's
only?
only market, it's always like, okay, so we'll, you know, one inspections, but it's for our knowledge, like, if it's back out, but we want us for repairs, you know.
But you got the opportunity to get out.
To terminate, yeah.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, but then the seller should
So
say,
it's a catch, it's a catch. Why would a seller take that? Because they're like, oh, you need inspections and usually that's not good without inspection. Right, but we can't ask you to fix anything, so it's like.
do you get the idea that this inspection issue is a big deal?
Yes.
And requires some explanation and requires some thought, and there's no one size fits all. Everybody got that?
Correct.
No one size fits all. Now, in the on-lot sewage addendum, we changed some language and it really has been causing some problems. Because it says this, if a hydraulic load test is required, the seller will pump the tank out and will provide the water. What if you have a crappy well on the property?
That happens to me.
Exactly. Yeah, and look, I have never spoken to a bunch of buildings where it hasn't happened. And so suddenly, where are you? You're calling that guy, the swimming pool guy with the truck, and he comes over and it's the same price as if you filled the pool.
Worse, the agent on the other side now tells you your well is bad,
Yes,
as well as.
exactly.
What's touching it.
Yeah, it's all becomes, it's a zip. So all I'm telling you is be careful of this because they snuck that language in there and it's stuff that you need to tell the seller. Now, listen, when you sell in this clause, because they ask for an onsite, they initial here, this is what you get to do because they initial here. Okay, so how do you get into court? How do you get sued? How do you get the sheriff coming to your house?
We don't know.
Number one, the last 3 or 4 years is selling your own house. We have, how many of those lawsuits have we filed in the last week? Where the seller takes their own listing, they sell their own property, they make a misrepresentation on the seller's disclosure. And guess what they've just done? Remember earlier I said that the seller's agent usually has a get out of jail free card because they're only responsible for what they know at the moment of closing. But if you're the seller and the seller's agent, then you know it at the moment of closing and you just brought your broker into a lawsuit and your broker is not going to be happy. So unless you're one of these people who got one of these awards, you might be over at somebody else's shop where they don't make you sell, where you just go to meetings. So That's a big thing. I'm gonna tell you,
You're talking about agents on their house.
agents selling their own house, and they're the listing agent for their own house. Far better, get somebody else in the office, somebody on another team, yes.
I don't think E&O covers you, Tim.
You just hit the nail on the head. I don't think E&O covers you on those kinds of things. And there may be some issues with the broker. I'm gonna be in court in Harrisburg tomorrow. And the insurance company is USLI. They insure the broker that is being sued in this case. Now, she's being sued because she was allowing property management to be done and she wasn't supervising it. And the people that were doing it stole $900,000. But I sued her saying that you negligently supervised this person. And I said to her in a deposition, so Sue, you supervised your cousin who was running the property management business? Oh yeah, I did a really great job. In fact, and Sue, you know about it because you've been a broker for 40 years. In fact, you're the chairman of the real estate caucus at the State House of Representatives, aren't you? So you really know this stuff. And you've been an officer of PAR. So tell me, what did you do to supervise your brother-in-law or cousin, wherever he was doing the business, Glenn Lehman? And she said, well, he was a cousin, so I would see him at family events, and he'd always drive up in a nice brand new Buick. So I thought he was doing well, and I'd say, Glenn, how are things going with property management? And he would say, they're going well. I said, okay, so you never did a reconciliation of the bank. So anyway, the point I'm making is this. The insurance company for the brokerage company is saying that they're not covering her as the broker, and they're not covering the agents for negligent conduct because they only insure the brokerage company and will protect the brokerage company. Well, how the heck can a brokerage company act without a broker or salesperson or associate broker doing something? So that's what I'm going to be arguing tomorrow, amongst other things. But my point is, you really got to be careful on your insurance. So when the company renews the policy, tell your mom, make sure you look at the policy, don't buy USLI. But believe me, I'm going to tell USLI that every time I speak before realtors, I'm counteracting all the nice commercials that they're running. In any event, flipping. Any of you actually get involved in flipping yourself? Okay, I've had lots of cases where I'm defending a realtor who's been involved in a flip. And it's always because they go hire somebody, it's one of their friends to do the work, who cuts the corners and cut every corner. And somebody buys a house that's been flipped. It looks nice on the outside. It looks, it looks like a builder just built it. Looks like it could be Toll Brothers or Pulte or one of these other people. But that's what the skin looks like. But the bones are not the same. And so that's really dangerous. Being too smart. I have had cases where realtors have gone around and they've said to the buyers, well, yeah, I know all about electrical, and this electrical system, this is really good. This is a really specialized kind of generator. It's a Generac, and it's the very, very best. Oh, and and the solar panels that are on the roof, they're for top of the line. And they had the basement done by B-Dry. They did the very best. Not the time to show off what you know. You're doing. You get caught in representations. Be really careful that there's a representation being made. It's not your representation. It's always the seller's, or in some cases, the buyer's representation. It's always the seller says this, the buyer says this. It's never that you say this. Referrals. I often get questions like, can you get sued if you make a referral to just one person as opposed to making them to three? And the answer is, I have never seen a successful negligent failure to refer case make it all the way through trial, except in the case where they were referring to somebody who everybody in the office knew had been sued 40 times, and all he had was a magnetic sign on his truck, and he was really an alcoholic, and he used to be able to do inspections before he fell into the disease of alcoholism. And that was the only time I've ever seen that happen. So yeah, should you give a couple of names, it's fine. But the bigger problem is the failure to refer. Because that goes back to that provision in the law and relevant that says that if you don't know something, if you're not an expert in the area, you need to refer somebody into that area so they can do it, so that you don't end up looking at these people. So Summary. Real quick, simple summary. You're an equiper. You're not a decider. And every time you're ready to say something to a consumer, ask yourself this question before you say it. Am I making a decision for them, or am I equipping them to make the decision? Because in the end, every successful lawsuit against a real estate licensing, almost all of them boil down to a licensee who made the decision. If you look at a title report and you say it's okay and there's a defect in the title report, you're jointly liable with the title insurance company. They get sued. So anyway, now, that's it. Does anybody have any questions? Yes.
What about love letters? So this is where the buyer submits a letter
Good one.
to the seller and it says with a picture of them sometimes,
Or
or
children.
children, you got a dog in there and they're saying, pick me because I'm.
I mean, if you think that that's gonna make the buyer's offer better, well, it's not a legal issue. I mean, unless there's some statement in there that's a lie. And if there's a statement in there that's not true, like, you know, my son wants to be here because he's a star soccer player and it's right down the street from the soccer field where he plays. If that's a lie, it's not that you're gonna get sued over that lie. It's that if there's a lawsuit over some big issue, they're gonna start by the little issue and they're gonna point out the lie. And then you're gonna see the argument to the jury, and which is gonna be the time where the lawyer says, I'm gonna take you back to Catholic school. I'm gonna give you some Latin. I'm gonna give you some real simple Latin. Falsus in unus, falsus in omnibus. Remember when this guy that was telling us that he didn't know about all these things in the house, he told you, and he wants you to believe that that's true. He wants you to believe he was stupid when he went through that house. But you also remember when he wrote that letter talking about his son who was playing hockey or soccer down the field from the house? And he admitted on the witness stand, didn't he, that he doesn't even have a son. Or that his son doesn't play hockey or soccer, whatever the sport is. So you have to ask yourself this, why is that principle in the law? It's in the law because it really means something. Falsus in unus, false in one thing, falsus in omnibus, false in everything. You have looked at that person and that person is a liar. There's no nice way to say it, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. He's a liar. You can't believe that one thing because he's admitted he lied, and you can't believe another thing that comes out of that mouth of his.
So I have a question.
Does that make sense?
Would you present that at the offer? Like that letter, or do you mean like if they drop it in the door? And you don't
No,
know about it?
With the offer.
Okay.
So I mean, I'm asking a question
Just
from
make sure
both
it's
sides.
true.
So if you're the selling agent, do you present that to the
No,
seller?
My
or
client
to
dropped it in the door and I didn't even know about it. Melanie's lawyer was on this side. And
No, he called you and yelled
we
at you.
got the offer, now we got it.
Oh, well, good. Well, here's the thing.
But it wasn't a lie, like she wrote a
Yeah,
legitimate.
If everything in there is true, it can't bite you. But if there's one false thing, I'm gonna have you on the witness stand over that point, and I'm gonna spend 20 minutes talking about that point. And then I'll come back to it. And then I'll come back to it, and I'll say to the jury, and I'll say, listen, I hate to go to the Department of Redundancy Department, but let me ask you again about that letter.
What about fair housing? That
Yeah.
Really, my question was pointed towards.
Well-
If I'm sending something in
Ah.
and it's, this ethnicity of this family is this, and somebody didn't pick it because.
I'm gonna tell you that if there's anything in that letter that discusses national origin, sex, religion, all of the protected things. Listen, I saw somebody, the other day, and they called me, and this was maybe a month or 2 months ago, and they came here to look to buy a house, and the buyer's agent looked at them and said, oh, well, you need to be in buyer station. And you can see I don't discriminate against people who are Indian, because I've got Kenki right in my office, who actually is admitted to practice law in India, not here. But the buyer's agent said, no, you'll be more comfortable. No.
Oh, goodness.
So is that gonna be a fair housing case?
Yeah.
Yeah, it might. The people aren't mad enough yet, but But yeah, yes, yes.
I mean, I always do what Jim was saying earlier. I let the client, the seller decide if they want to read those letters or not. I'll say to them, I'm gonna forward you the offer. There's, a cover letter from the buyer. Do you want to read them or do you not? And I let the seller decide.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you, if I'm a seller, I don't wanna read it.
Yeah, most of my sellers say.
I don't-
Because if there's a picture, that is.
Yeah.
Oh, if there's a picture, you should not show it to your seller, period.
Right.
No exceptions to it. You should not show it to your seller because that is, or if there's anything in there, even if the seller wants to see it, if there's anything in there that you think, because you gotta remember, the way you'll lose fair housing cases isn't because you have perfect facts, like the situation with the elevator towers not working. It's more these pretext discrimination things. And it's good because, look, people shouldn't be discriminated against in housing opportunities. Everybody should have exactly the same opportunity to live wherever they want to. And everything that you participate in that could be argued to diminish that. Let's imagine that you send me I'm listing my property for sale, I get 3 offers. And I get an offer from someone who looks exactly like me, they got their picture, some old guy with a bald head, and glasses. And then I got another picture of Kathy, I got this lady as another person in there. I'm setting somebody up for pretext discrimination because if the person who looked like me had a better credit score and that person selected, well, maybe there was discrimination. That's because people discriminate. Everybody will tell you, I never discriminate. I never do. And everybody does in one fashion or another. You learn to control it. But the less information that you give people that can trigger that discrimination ability in them, the better off you are. And so I don't like pictures at all. Yes.
So I have a question about like the ring camera, any kind of interior or exterior surveillance, and you tell people, and they have surveillance in here, and they still talk, they talk about in the driveway, so.
Well, you're a buyer's
so
agent.
I had a seller that had it, and she watched and listened, they watched and listened to everyone that came through, and they wanted to show it to me, so I want to see it, I'm like, here, that's on you.
Well,
I'm like, all we care about is their money.
you're a buyer's agent.
I did just put it.
Buyer's agent,
That's
you
a
need to
listing.
absolutely tell the consumer, we're not gonna discuss anything about this. I don't want you to even just, ooh, that looks nice.
Yeah.
Don't say anything in the house because if you look, there's a Nest camera up there, and there's a Ring doorbell outside.
Everybody has cameras in their house.
They do.
Watching, you can't say anything.
It's almost like you wish you could, before you show the house, you wish you could go figure out where the Verizon line coming in. Yes,
Okay, but we're gonna get into the hard, dumb stuff.
okay, now we sit down.
Okay, so on the appraisal contingency.
Yep.
There's 2 spots.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
The top one and the bottom.
Yep.
Just out of interest, should we be, so I just had this come up, and then the only difference I could find or think of was that it referred you back to section 8 of the agreement of sale.
Correct.
The only reason I had to think about it, it was really hard, was because the buyer's agent assured me, and I think he's right, that the loan to value was so low, I think it was, they were gonna be putting $300,000 down, right? But in the event that the house did not appraise, which they're gonna pay the difference, it could be $70,000 more. So he made the loan to value ratio, that 300 up to 70%. Can't even do it, like I have to be looking at it. But anyway, he said to me, he clicked off, he actually ended up dropping it because it made me so nervous. But would we have been okay doing the second one? Referring it back to the agreement of sale if there was a 70%.
Back to the mortgage contingency clause.
Correct, it would have gone back to section 8 of the agreement of sale. And it would have gone up to 70% of, and the house was $673,000.
So I will tell you how I answered that question for someone a month ago. Almost the same question, different Remax office, same question. I do not know, remember, if you're in court, you're gonna be in front of 3 lawyers. I do not know where you could find 3 lawyers that would understand the distinction that you're talking about and find 3 of them in order to explain it. So you have to say to yourself, how do I dumb this down so that if there's an issue, it's not gonna blow up? Because you could be absolutely 100% right, but if 2 of the 3 lawyers on the panel work in the public defender's office, it doesn't matter that you're right theoretically. So if what you're trying to accomplish is that you want the deal to be able to have to go forward as long as the LTV doesn't go over 70, what if you just put down in the very last blank spot? Nothing in this contract to the contrary withstanding. Buyer is obligated to buy as long as the LTV does not exceed 70%. So haven't you solved the problem and not gotten lost in the language?
I'm practicing longer than that.
So, well, except that if you heard it from a lawyer to do that, that's real close. But I'm just telling you that if you read something and you're saying, I'm not sure which of these 2 things really applies, then you go back to, what do I want to accomplish? And can I say it in 1 sentence or 2 sentences?
Just drop in the appraisal
I
contingency.
hate that.
And he just said, he just wrote in there that if the house doesn't appraise, it doesn't matter, they're gonna purchase it.
I scratched my head
Okay.
with that too.
So,
Yeah.
wouldn't that be on the buyer's agent though, to inform their buyer that like, hey, this is what we're doing? Isn't she kind of let off the hook then?
It's the buyer's agent's responsibility to equip the buyer, and it's the seller's agent's responsibility to equip the seller. Everybody has to equip everybody, because when they sign their name to it, this is a decision that they have made together. I mean, this is the contract that they both have to agree on what it is.
Right, they're planning to get so much down, right?
They put $300,000 down on a potential, they were buying it for $673.
Okay, so I am in a similar situation, not that I'd sell, but we have an appraisal issue now. But they can mess with her loan and wrap it
Because
into the
they-
loan because she's
Got
putting
it.
50% down. So we can put like 48% down, because we have an $8,000.
We didn't match them because it was an escalation. We didn't match. So they just said they were gonna borrow $300,000, but what they did on the loan to value was that they just amped it up to 70%.
Okay.
So 70% of 673 is something like 370,000.
So you got an appraisal waiver, that they didn't have to get.
So I got nervous about the whole thing, and I just said, can we just drop?
Well, let me give you your example for a second, because you have the person on mortgage contingency applying for a $300,000 loan, but when they do the 70% thing, it really means that they will go up to 370, you're saying? And is it absolutely clear in the contract for both parties that they will increase the amount of their mortgage application to match the LTV change? Is that clear in your contract?
Well, what we ended up doing was we didn't even use the,
You got rid of the LTV stuff.
we got rid of, no, we got rid of the LTV. What we did get rid of was the addendum that says there's more. Got rid of the contingency.
Okay, well, then that's, once
I
you
dumped it down as much as I
You
could.
mean, yeah, look, if you dumb it down as much as you can, and it says what you want it to say, you're less likely to have a consumer being sued. And if it's less likely that a consumer is gonna be sued, less likely that you're gonna be sued.
And try to get the waiver like Bill does all the time, or something like that.
What was the waiver? Oh, the.
Oh, the appraisal waiver.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it goes with the offer.
What happens when the lender loses the appraisal waiver, like if they don't, have you ever had that?
Mm-mm.
No. I'm not happy that they're.
So let me go to your comments for just a minute. And I'm gonna go back 20 years, and I'm going to a Remax office in Los Angeles, so that I'm not besmirching somebody around here. But it was determined that they were regularly having an agreement of sale that they were submitting to the lenders, and that there was an addendum for everyone that really changed some of the terms, but that wasn't going up to the lenders. The lenders just plain never saw it.
That's how people do it all the time.
People do it all the time. So what happened to the Remax office? So Remax office in Los Angeles, $4 million fine. Wow. It was a $4 million fine. They were literally calling everybody that represents more than one Remax office in the country and talking to us because they were sweating bullets. And the feds were asking for a $20 million fine. So
Lenders don't want to see it even.
I don't care what the lenders don't want to see. The problem is, I hear you, but I'm just telling you, you understand what the risk is. I've equipped you to make a decision. I'm not making a decision. Any other questions?
Can we put it on retainer?
There's some agents that have them on retainer.
Hey,
Their attorneys, yeah.
she'll tell you, one day a week, every week, Tom McQuilkin and I are having lunch. Tom owns Remax
Yeah,
Professional.
yeah.
You know Tom and Kathy.
Yep.
So I have lunch with Tom at least one day a week, every week, no matter what. Now, he's my best friend, so, you know, but,
You hear it all too.
but I get all the business questions all the time, so. yeah.
So this was good. Thank you
Any other
very much.
questions?
Yes.
Do you have business cards?
You know what, I went to my office to pick up a bunch of them this morning, and I don't know if I got many, but all the